This ugly, scratched half-dollar sitting in a drawer could be worth more than a brand new car. One sold for over $100,000, and most people would have spent it without a second thought. Most people have never even seen a 1999 half-dollar in circulation, and that alone should make you pause before you ignore one. Because here's the truth, while it may look like just another modern coin, some 1999 half-dollars with no mint mark, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, have quietly become collector favorites, and in the right condition, they can sell for hundreds, sometimes even more. Now imagine this, you come across a dull, slightly scratched 1999 half-dollar. It doesn't shine. It doesn't stand out. It looks like it's been sitting untouched for years. Most people would toss it aside or spend it without thinking twice. But that boring coin might actually be far more valuable than it appears. The first clue is rarity in circulation. By 1999, half-dollars were no longer widely used in everyday transactions. The United States Mint was still producing them, but mostly for collectors and special sets, not for general spending. That means far fewer of these coins ended up in pockets, cash registers, or loose change. So if you find one, especially a 1999 p, you're already holding something that most people rarely encounter. Now look at the front of the coin. You'll see John F. Kennedy once again. But here's where it gets interesting, because many of these coins were never heavily circulated. Some of them still have incredibly sharp details, even if they don't look perfect at first glance. Focus on Kennedy's hair, his jawline, and the fine lines around his profile. If those details appear crisp and well-defined, even with light scratches or dullness, that's a strong sign your coin could be in higher-than-average condition. And condition is everything. A 1999 p half-dollar in typical circulated condition might only be worth face value. But one that appears close to uncirculated, what collectors call mint state, can easily jump to $50, $100, or more. And coins graded at the very top levels, like MS-66 or MS-67, have sold for several $100s at auction. Now flip the coin over. Take a close look at the eagle design. Pay attention to the feathers, the shield, and the lettering. If the lines look sharp and not overly worn, you might be holding a coin that was never truly used, even if it doesn't look shiny anymore. But here's where things get really exciting. Some 1999 p half-dollars show subtle minting errors that most people completely miss. Look carefully at the words Liberty and In God We Trust. If you notice slight doubling, like the letters have a faint shadow or appear slightly thicker than normal, that could be a doubled die error. These are rare, and collectors are always searching for them. Another thing to watch for is weak or uneven strikes. If certain parts of the coin look softer or less defined while others are sharp, it might not be wear. It could be a striking issue from the mint. These kinds of inconsistencies can actually increase the coin's value. Also, check the rim of the coin. If it looks unusually thick in some areas or slightly off-center, that could indicate a striking error. Even a small misalignment can make a big difference in value. And don't overlook toning. If your 1999 half-dollar has developed unusual colors over time, golden hues, deep blues, or even subtle rainbow patterns, that natural toning can make it more desirable to collectors. Coins with attractive toning often sell for a premium, especially when combined with strong detail. Now here's something most people never realize. Because these coins were often sold in collector sets, many of them were stored away for years without being touched. That means a coin that looks slightly dull today might actually have never been circulated at all. It just lost its shine over time, but kept all its important details. And that's exactly what serious collectors look for. A seemingly ugly Coin with sharp features and minimal real wear can be far more valuable than a shiny coin that's been heavily handled. Think about that. A $50 you might overlook, or even spend, could actually be worth hundreds of dollars, just because it survived in better condition than most. So the next time you come across a 1999 $50, don't judge it by its appearance alone. Take a closer look. Check the details. Look for doubling, unusual alignment, or strong design features. Next coin. A 1980 $50 doesn't usually turn heads. It looks old, a bit worn, maybe even slightly discolored from decades of sitting in drawers or jars. Most people assume it's just another forgotten coin from the past. But here's the surprising part: some 1980 $50 from the Philadelphia Mint have sold for hundreds, and in rare cases, even more, simply because of a few small details that most people never think to check. Now picture this: you find a 1980 Kennedy $50 mixed in with other coins. It's not shiny. It might have scratches. Maybe the surface looks a little dull. Nothing about it screams valuable. And that's exactly why these coins get overlooked. By 1980, $50 were already fading out of everyday use. They weren't circulating heavily, which means many of them were stored away rather than spent. That's important, because coins that weren't used as much often retain stronger details, even if they don't look perfect on the surface. Start with the front of the coin. You'll see John F. Kennedy. Now look closely at his hair and profile. If the lines in his hair still look sharp, and his jawline appears clean and well-defined, that's your first clue the coin may be in better condition than it appears. Even a slightly worn coin can still have strong underlying detail, and that's what collectors pay for. Now shift your attention to the lettering. Look at Liberty and In God We Trust. If the letters appear bold and not completely flattened, that's another positive sign. But here's where things get interesting: check for any signs of doubling. If you notice that the letters look slightly thicker than normal, or there's a faint shadow around them, you could be looking at a doubled die error. These are subtle, easy to miss, and extremely desirable to collectors. Next, flip the coin over and examine the eagle. Focus on the feathers and the shield. If the feather lines are still visible and not completely worn smooth, your coin may fall into a higher grade category. Coins with stronger reverse details often command higher prices, especially when paired with a decent front design. Now check the rim of the coin. If it looks uneven, slightly thicker in certain areas, or not perfectly centered, that could indicate a minting error. Most people would assume it's damage, but collectors know better. Even small striking errors can increase a coin's value significantly. Another thing to watch for is unusual toning. If your 1980 $50 has developed colors over time, maybe a golden tint, light blue shades, or even a subtle rainbow effect, that natural toning can make it more appealing. Collectors often pay extra for coins with attractive, original color patterns, especially when the details underneath are still strong. And here's something many people don't realize. A coin doesn't have to be shiny to be valuable. In fact, some of the most valuable coins look ugly at first glance. They might be dull, lightly scratched, or discolored, but if they haven't been heavily circulated and still hold their original detail, they can be worth far more than expected. A typical 1980 $50 in average condition might only be worth face value. But one with strong detail, minimal real wear, or a noticeable error can easily reach $50, $100, or more. And in top condition, what collectors call mint state, some have sold for several $100s at auction. Think about that. A coin sitting unnoticed for decades, possibly ignored every time someone cleaned out a drawer, could actually be worth hundreds of dollars today. all because of a few small details hiding in plain sight. So before you dismiss that 1980 half dollar as just another old coin, take a closer look. Check the hair detail, the lettering, the eagle's feathers, and the rim. Look for doubling, unusual alignment, or unique toning. Next coin. You might have seen a 1973 half dollar before, dull, scratched, maybe even a little discolored from years of sitting in a drawer. Most people glance at it and assume it's just another 50-cent piece with no real value. But here's the surprising truth. Some of these 1973 coins, especially those struck in Philadelphia with no mint mark, have sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, depending on what to look for. The first thing you need to understand is that a 1973 half dollar with no mint mark was made at the Philadelphia Mint, and while millions were produced, not all of them came out perfect. In fact, the imperfections are exactly what can make one of these coins incredibly valuable. Now imagine this, you're holding a worn-looking 1973 half dollar. The surface looks tired. Maybe there are small scratches, a bit of fading, and it doesn't shine like newer coins. Most people would dismiss it instantly. But hidden within that worn surface could be a rare detail that collectors are actively hunting for. Start by looking closely at the face of the coin. You'll see John F. Kennedy. This is known as the Kennedy half dollar, and it's been in circulation since 1964. On a 1973 coin, the details of Kennedy's hair and profile are very important. If those details still look sharp, even slightly sharper than usual, that's your first clue you might have something special. But here's where it gets interesting. Some 1973 Philadelphia half dollars were struck with what collectors call high-grade preservation. That means even if the coin looks worn at first glance, certain areas, like the lettering or Kennedy's profile, might still show strong definition. Coins graded at higher levels, like MS-65 or above, have been known to fetch serious money at auction. And yes, even a coin that looks a bit dirty could fall into this category if it hasn't been heavily circulated. Now flip the coin over. On the back, you'll see the American Eagle design along with the words, United States of America, and a half dollar. Pay very close attention to the lettering and the eagle's feathers. If the feathers appear unusually crisp or the lines are more defined than expected, that's another strong indicator. But the real hidden value often comes from small minting errors, things that are easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for. For example, some 1973 P half dollars have slight doubling in the text. Look closely at the words Liberty or In God We Trust. If you notice a shadow-like effect, where the letters seem doubled or slightly shifted, that could be a doubled die error. These are rare, and collectors love them. Another clue is something called off-center strikes. If the design looks slightly misaligned, like it wasn't stamped perfectly in the center, that's not damage, that's a minting error. And errors like that can turn an ordinary coin into a valuable collectible overnight. Even small details like unusual toning can add value. If your coin has developed a unique color over time, maybe a mix of gold, blue, or even rainbow-like shades, that natural aging can make it more desirable. Collectors often pay extra for coins with attractive toning, especially if the underlying details are still strong. Now here's something most people don't realize. Back in the early 1970s, these coins weren't heavily used in everyday transactions like smaller denominations. That means many 1973 half dollars were stored away in rolls, drawers, or collections. So when one shows up today with unique features or better than average condition, it stands out immediately. And that's where the money comes in. A standard 1973 P half dollar in average condition might only be worth face value. But one with strong details, minimal wear, or a noticeable error can jump to $50, $100, or more. And in top condition, with the right characteristics, some have sold for over $1,000 at auction. Think about that for a second. A coin most people would spend without hesitation could actually be worth $1,000 or more, just because of a few small details hiding in plain sight. Next coin. A 1997 half-dollar is the kind of coin most people don't even bother to pick up. It looks modern, common, and honestly, a little boring. But here's the reality. Some 1997 half-dollars from the Philadelphia Mint have quietly sold for hundreds of dollars, and the only difference between those and the ones people ignore comes down to a few tiny details. Now think about this. You find a 1997 Kennedy half-dollar sitting in a drawer or tucked inside an old coin jar. It's not shiny. Maybe it has light scratches or a dull finish from years of storage. Nothing about it looks special. That's exactly why it gets overlooked. By the late 1990s, half-dollars were barely used in circulation. The United States Mint was still producing them, but most were going straight into collector rolls and sets rather than everyday use. That means a lot of 1,997 coins spent years sitting untouched. And that's where the opportunity is. Start by looking at the front of the coin. You'll see John F. Kennedy. Now focus on the details, his hair, the lines in his profile, and the clarity of the lettering. If those features still look sharp and well-defined, even if the coin doesn't shine, that's your first clue you might have something valuable. Because in coin collecting, condition doesn't always mean brightness, it means detail. A coin can look dull but still be in high-grade condition if it hasn't been heavily worn down. Now check the lettering. Look closely at Liberty and In God We Trust. If the letters appear bold and clean, that's a good sign. But if you notice something unusual, like slight doubling, thicker edges, or a faint shadow around the letters, you could be looking at a double die error. These errors are subtle, easy to miss, but extremely valuable to collectors. Next, flip the coin over and study the eagle. Pay attention to the feathers and the shield. If the feather lines are still visible and not completely smooth, your coin may have stronger than average detail. Coins with crisp reverse designs often bring higher prices, especially when paired with a sharp front. Now here's something most people completely ignore: the rim. Look at the edge of the coin. If it seems uneven, slightly thicker in one area, or not perfectly centered, that could be a striking error from the mint. Many people assume it's damage, but collectors know that these small imperfections can actually increase value. Also, don't overlook the surface of the coin. If you see unusual lines, raised marks, or patterns that don't look like normal scratches, those could be die cracks or other minting anomalies. These are rare, and they can turn an ordinary-looking coin into something collectors are actively searching for. And then there's toning. If your 1997 half-dollar has developed unique colors over time, gold, blue, or even subtle rainbow shades, that natural toning can make it more desirable. Coins with attractive toning often sell for a premium, especially when the underlying detail is still strong. Now here's the part that surprises most people. A regular 1997 p half-dollar in average condition might only be worth face value. But one with sharp detail, minimal real wear, or a noticeable error can jump to $50, $100, or more. And in top condition, those near-perfect coins that somehow avoided wear entirely, some have sold for several $100s at auction. Think about that. A coin most people wouldn't even look at twice, could actually be worth far more than expected, just because of a few hidden details. And because so many of these coins were stored rather than used, there's still a real chance of finding one in exceptional condition. So before you ignore that 1997 half dollar, take a closer look. Check the details. Study the lettering. Examine the edges and the surface. Next coin. At first glance, a 2017 half dollar looks almost too new to be valuable, shiny, modern, and easy to ignore. Most people assume anything that recent can't possibly be worth more than 50 cents. But here's the twist, some 2017 half dollars from the Philadelphia Mint have already sold for hundreds of dollars, and a few exceptional pieces have pushed even higher, all because of details that most people never notice. Now imagine this, you find a 2017 Kennedy half dollar sitting in a drawer, maybe mixed in with other coins. It looks clean, maybe slightly dull from storage, but nothing special. No obvious damage, no flashy color. Just a normal coin. That's exactly why it gets overlooked. By 2017, half dollars were barely used in everyday circulation. The United States Mint was producing them mainly for collectors, not for general spending. That means most 2017 half dollars never saw heavy use at all. Many were kept in rolls, sets, or stored away untouched. So when one shows up outside of those sets, it already stands out. Now take a close look at the front of the coin. You'll see John F. Kennedy once again. But this time, the details are often incredibly sharp, sometimes sharper than older coins, because of modern minting technology. Focus on the fine lines in Kennedy's hair, the texture of his profile, and the clarity of the lettering. If everything looks crisp and well-defined, you may be holding a coin that qualifies as high grade, even if it doesn't look perfect at first glance. Here's where the money starts to build. Coins graded at MS66, MS67, or higher are extremely desirable. And because modern coins like 2017 halves are expected to be perfect, even the smallest flaw can lower their grade. That means truly flawless examples are rare, and collectors will pay serious money for them. Now flip the coin over and study the eagle. Look at the feathers, the shield, and the edges of the design. If everything appears razor-sharp with no visible wear, you could be holding a near-perfect specimen. Even tiny differences, like slightly stronger feather lines or clearer lettering, can separate a $1 coin from a $200 coin. But the real hidden value comes from something else entirely. Errors. Even in modern minting, mistakes still happen, and when they do, they create some of the most valuable coins. Check the lettering carefully. Look at Liberty and In God We Trust. If you notice any doubling, slight shifting, or thickness in the letters, that could be a double die error. These are rare, especially in newer coins, and collectors actively hunt for them. Next, examine the rim. If it looks uneven, thicker on one side, or slightly off-center, that could be a striking error. Most people would assume it's damage, but in reality, it could significantly increase the coin's value. Also watch for surface anomalies. Small die cracks, unusual lines, or raised bumps that don't look like scratches can all be signs of mint errors. These tiny details often go unnoticed, but they can turn a common coin into a collectible piece. And here's something even more surprising. Some 2017 p half dollars were produced with a special satin or enhanced finish for collector sets. If one of these coins somehow ends up loose, it might look slightly different from a standard coin, softer shine, smoother texture, and more refined details. To the untrained eye, it might look dull or even worn. But to a collector, it's exactly what they're looking for. Now think about this. A coin that looks too normal to be valuable, too new to matter, could actually be worth hundreds of dollars, simply because it's in exceptional condition or carries a small minting error. And because most people don't expect modern coins to be valuable, they don't even check. That's where the opportunity is. So the next time you see a 2017 Kennedy half dollar, don't assume it's just pocket change. Look closer. Check the details. Examine the edges, the lettering, and the overall sharpness.